Catchy music, right? All right. Hi, I'm Darlene with Digital Photo Mentor. Welcome to another YouTube live stream on our channel. I see that we've got a lot of familiar names in the chat already. Bjorn from Sweden, welcome. I'd love to know how you say good morning. I guess it would be evening probably there where you are now. Afternoon for Marguerite in Ontario. McElrod, I have one of your images on the queue for today, I believe. And I think I've got some of Sig's as well. Ontario, Oregon, Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. Vicky's from snowy Edmonton, which is where I'm at. We got a dump of snow overnight. So I'd like to welcome everybody wherever you're joining from. Ooh, Flying Camel. I like your handle there. That's very cool. What is your actual name if you'd like to share with us? And Deb from Alaska. Awesome. Thanks for joining in. As usual, what I do here every week is edit subscriber submitted images using Lightroom, Photoshop, and Luminar. The current version of Luminar is Luminar Neo. That's what I'll be using to demonstrate for a few of the things today. And I try and use the software that the person that submitted the image is using so that they can see and try and replicate what it is that I'm doing with their image. So I've got a few really good images submitted. I've got some that were submitted a while ago and some new ones submitted this week by some new people. So that's kind of exciting. And I can't wait to dig in. The notice on the screen that you see here, that is where you can go to submit your images if you haven't sent any. Preferably, we like to have raw images, so raw unedited. And I've actually got some JPEGs today that were submitted, and I'll show you why you want to be shooting raw and why you want to send me the raw files versus JPEGs on either end. Flying Camel is Seuss. Seuss? Seuss, or is that short for Susan or just Seuss? Let me get started. So let me hop over into Lightroom and I will get started. All right, here we've got some images. I got one of Anne's as well, and I may have one of Holly's. So if you recognize your image on the screen, I may be doing one of yours today. The first thing I wanted to start with was the talk we had earlier about, or just mentioned a moment ago, about shooting JPEG versus RAW, and also what happens when you go to process them. If you want to share, please, Rob is my husband, for those of you that are new to this live stream, and he will often be sharing things in the chat for you, links to articles that I mentioned, and I just realized I got to adjust my microphone. How's that? Is that better? So he'll be sharing things in the chat with you. And the first one that I want him to bring up is the RAW versus JPEG article that we have discussing the pros and cons. There isn't many cons of shooting RAW. So I'm going to be looking over here because that's where my Lightroom is. I've got two screens. So when I bring this image into Lightroom, you can see, I'll just bring that up. You can see it's a JPEG, okay? So I can still see all the shooting information and how it was shot and so on. I'm not sure if this is the original or if this is an edited version, right? So if I look at this metadata, what I'm looking for is the size of the image, okay? So it's 3,000 pixels by 1,800. I'm guessing, based on the fact that this is a Nikon D80, which is a larger format, that this has been cropped and edited, right? And same thing here. This is a D7000. Yeah, the files have both been cropped and edited. So these are not the original camera files. So when you send me your images, I'm looking for the original camera file because this one has already been edited. It's hard for me to know what the original looks like or if it's been pushed up too bright on purpose. So I want to ask you guys, what do you see about this image that you would want to fix or correct in terms of photo editing? what is the problem and where am I looking in Lightroom to see that. So not just visually, but there's a cue, there's a clue that's on the screen right now. Okay. I'll give you a hint. It's in the upper right corner. What am I looking at to tell me that this image is overexposed or too bright? I'll wait to hear from everybody and say some more hellos. Yes, that's AJ, I believe. That's overexposed. So what am I looking at, AJ? Holly says all the bright areas are too bright. Sheila, nice to have you. Too light, lots of detail in the highlights. Aha. Leah wins the prize. Yes, the histogram is too far to the right, meaning that it is definitely showing me it's overexposed. And Anne's got the same answer as well. Okay, so a few people are saying histogram. Yeah, so that is exactly what the answer I'm looking for here. Okay, so it's off the graph on the right here. Let me turn on my little cursor thing. Okay, so if I zoom in, let me see if I can do that. Okay, right here is where I'm looking. Okay, so everything is pushed over to the right, and this part here is telling me that it's clipping. So clipping means no detail in that area in the whites. I could turn on the clipping warnings for the highlights using this little triangle here, just clicking it, or hitting J on my keyboard, which will then turn on clipping for highlights and shadows. So you see where these red areas are in the image, those will have no detail. Okay, there's nothing there. And here is where there's pure black with no detail. So it's not just that it's too bright, it's actually contrasty as well. So there's clipping on both ends. So I can try and adjust it in here. Now there's a little trick with the Alt Option key. So if you hold Alt Option down, when you click any of these sliders in Lightroom, it will actually show you the same clipping areas. You see that? So where it was red before, now I'm seeing the highlights because I'm clicking on the highlight slider and holding down the Alt Option key. So what I want to do is drag it to the left until those clippings disappear. So I didn't go very far. So now there's detail, okay, but the whole image is overly bright. So I'm going to darken the whole image a little bit, okay? Because what do we know about sand? I mean, it should be, a little bit closer to medium gray. It should be more in the middle of this image, right? So I'm going to darken it overall. So surprisingly, there's been a lot of detail pulled out, and now we just have a little bit of clipping on the blacks on the ladies. I believe it's a burqa. So I'm going to do Alt Option on the shadows. In this case, I'm going to drag it up. So I want a little bit more detail in those shadow areas. Okay, so see how when I increase that, you can actually see there's a pattern on her skirt, okay, that we couldn't even see before. So there's lots of contrast here, right? I could try and, oops, I'm trying to move the screen on my window here for the projection. Okay, so I can use the curves tool. I have a full video on how to use curves. If you want to share that in the link, please, Rob. Brandon, welcome from Calgary, I believe, if I remember correctly. Welcome. So we've got a few students coming from my Luminar Neo course. And if I pull this curve down, it's going to give me the same type of effect as adjusting the sliders, but I have a bit more control. So I can bring the highlights down more than the midtones, for example. Oops. Didn't mean to add an extra point. I wanted to pull that one down. So the curve's doing a nice thing here, right? So it's pulling a lot more detail out. I'm going to go back to basic because now the color just seems a little bit sort of wonky. And that's possible because it was either processed and overexposed. This is actually something for those of you that are in the Luminar Neo course. I just recorded lesson 19 for you. And let me just flip over here because I've got, oops. This here, if you are not currently doing my Luminar Neo course, Rob's going to grab a link to that for you as well. Okay. Neo students do rock, Sheila. Thanks. So lesson 19, I'm actually going to talk about monitor calibration because the issue with possibly with these images being overly bright and the fact that they're edited. You see how I'm doing sort of detective work to figure these things out based on file size and so on. If the person's monitor is set too dark, right, they'll actually be editing the wrong way. They'll edit the images too bright. So if VJ's monitor is set too dark, that could be why the images are coming out too bright. If your monitor is set too bright, your images will come out too dark, right? So if you have ever printed one of your images and it came back from the lab completely different than what you saw on your monitor, right? Tell me in the chat if that's ever happened to you. If you've had a print come back and it looks completely different, then it's a monitor calibration issue. And for those of you who are in the course, in the Luminar Neo course, I got you covered on lesson 19 on that one. So I talk all about what to do about it and the devices and so on that I use. We also talk about backing up. Okay, so continuing with this image, I'm going to add a little vignette on it. And instead of vignetting, I think I might just pull up a graduated filter. So I'm going to use a linear gradient from the bottom here. And I want to just darken the bottom a little bit. So it's just keeping the edge a bit darker. Okay, so you don't want things like that, okay, because that looks obvious. You want your, anytime you're adding a vignette or an edge darkening like this, you want it to be as gradual as possible so it looks natural, like maybe a shadow, okay? Can you see how that still looks natural? If I turn it off. Oops, where did my, aha, I moved my little thing around here. So if I turn it off and on, okay, see how that is looking really natural? And I'm going to try and fix the color because it looks a little bit off as well. So I'm going to try auto white balance. But you notice when I have a JPEG here, we don't have the same options as when we have a raw file. So for example, this is an image that Holly sent in. We have all of these options in terms of white balance presets. So all the same presets that you have in the camera, you have to process with when you shoot raw. When we shoot JPEG or process a JPEG, all you have is custom or auto. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to try auto. That's way better. Maybe a tiny bit too magenta. Okay, I'm trying to get rid of sort of this. It definitely had a green tinge to it. Okay, and now I am going to add another vignette. I like using the Lightroom masks as opposed to just the vignettes now because the masks are really smart. I'm using the select subject one here, and then I'm just going to click this to invert it. So now I have everything except the subject, and I can now darken everything this way. Right? I can also shift the color because I still feel like this is a weird color, this image. Right? So I want to give it a little bit more blue there, but leave them a little bit warmer. Okay, see what that's doing? So it's darkening around them. So let's see where we've come from. Right? Extremely overexposed to amazingly pulled back a lot of detail. Now, if I zoom in, this is the area that had all the clipping, okay? If I darken anymore, you see that there's no detail showing up. So even though it's not clipping, there's still no detail to be had. So I can darken these highlights as much as I want, but there's never going to have any detail come out. Versus if it was a raw file, I probably would have had some detail. So when you darken a JPEG that's really blown out like that, you'll end up with sort of muddy highlights, right? So there's a really great lesson on why not to shoot or edit JPEGs. Right? Similarly with this one, also from VJ, it's really overexposed again. So it still leads me to think that maybe his monitor is not calibrated correctly. Okay, so we can do a similar kind of adjustment. Right? Now, what else do you see with this image that you would want to correct or adjust? Okay, so besides brightness, what else is off here? Okay. I'll just grab some comments. Merle says, I print my own images and have software set to print about 0.75 to compensate for my monitor being out for a bit. Yeah, you can certainly do that. Okay, but if you're increasing the brightness when you print, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, Merle, because if you corrected your monitor a little bit brighter, then you wouldn't have to do that. Or if you had a proper device, I can show you and talk about the device that I use as well. Okay, so I use one. Let me just make myself a little bigger here. So I use one by upside down. I use this one by X-Rite. And if you want to grab the link for the replacement one, Rob, that I recommend, because they don't make my model anymore. They've replaced it with one called Display or something like that. This is what you need to calibrate your monitor properly, right? So it runs a series of software, it runs the colors through your monitor, and then it will help you set it to neutral, so you don't have to compensate for that. Okay, so let's see what everybody's saying. Holly says, too much saturation. Marguerite, too much of a green cast. Yeah, there's definitely something color-wise going on there. Maybe too yellow. Okay, so you're both on the right track there, because often when an image is off color, it's not just one. Okay, so it's usually yellow and green or magenta and blue. Now notice that on the color sliders here, they're going the opposite way. Okay, so I find that sometimes people correct and they'll go this way on both of them, but then you just end up with more green. Right, so if it's green, it's probably also yellow. Okay, so you probably want to go opposite ways on these. See how that's immediately better, right? Let's see. Histogram is not showing any information in the highlights. Okay, so I fixed that with the highlight and the exposure correction. Too green and not a realistic blue. Yeah, the sky looks an odd color, right? A little bit too saturated, too green. Yes, my favorite, neon puke, right? That's what I say. So let's see if we can make this color any better. So I'm going to try. Again, I only have auto and custom. I'm going to try auto first. Still not great. I'm not happy with that. I'm just going to undo. I'm going to try the eyedropper next. Okay, so let's just assume, or let's guess, that this path here or the building is neutral. Okay, so if I know, oops, I clicked on the grass. See how that works? Don't click on something green, because if I hover over the green, look what happens in the preview in the upper left. Okay, watch up here. Okay, if I click on anything green, it's going to give me the opposite color, which is lots of magenta. If I click on the sky, I'm going to get more yellow. So I'm going to try in here and just see if there's any kind of neutral in this building. Right? So it definitely neutralized it, but my guess would be that there's probably a little bit of yellow in the building, right? But it definitely looks better than when we started. And notice how just shifting the color has affected the green grass as well, right? Okay, what else would we might want to do? So this lesson this is for you guys to tell me what to do here. Okay, so now we fixed the exposure and we fixed the color a little bit. It might be still a little bit saturated, but what else do you want me to take a look at? Thanks, Holly. Yes, no offense to the photographer, right? So I want to thank VJ for submitting your images, because this is helping everybody learn. Because one of the things to learn about editing is when to know how far to go or when to stop, and when you've gone too far, okay? And that's actually something we're going to be talking about in the course as well. AJ says the building is not level. And Sheila, would I open up the shadows? Possibly. Byron said the same thing. All right, let's see about the building not being level. Okay, so how can I adjust that? If I'm using Lightroom, who's using Lightroom? How can I adjust this in Lightroom? I'm just looking for VJ's email here. Okay, so he's using Photoshop, an old version. Some cropping would be good. Okay, how would you crop it? So the crop tool can do a couple of things for us, right? It can remove parts of the image. Now, I'm guessing because of the image size that it's already been cropped, so we're coming in pretty small. I can also try the auto adjust here, which will see if there's any tilt. So it did correct a little bit. You see that it moved the angle to minus 0.23, right? And how would you want to crop it? Okay, so that's the level in the crop tool. Crop out some of the foreground, Holly says. Okay, so come up from the bottom here. I would agree with that, right? Because if the subject is this ruins or this cathedral, this path here is really taking a lot of the it's leading the eye. Okay, so we read a picture from left to right in Western culture, right? So this path is bringing you in here. It's not taking you to the ruins. It's taking you out of the picture, right? The other thing is that the grass is taking up a full third of the image. Okay, so the building is a third, the grass is a third, and the sky is a third. So let's see if we can minimize the amount of grass. Okay, so now that the building is visually taking up more space, okay, so that's called visual mass in your image in terms of composition. The thing that is the largest in the image is most likely the subject, right? So I definitely agree with cropping. Maybe not quite so much. So see what I'm doing is I'm cropping up to this shadow here, like that. So I have something dark on the edge of the picture, right? So I want to keep the eye in. Now there's some nice framing happening here with the trees on both sides. So that's keeping your eye in. And there's a really nice little cloud in the sky. Okay? So that's helping the grass not to stand out as much, right? The other way we can test to see if the image is level is down here under transform. So I could try auto and see if that did anything. So it did something. So see, it looks like it corrected a different way. Okay. If I turn on my crop tool again, I like to use the grid lines here. So when you click anywhere outside and just hold it, now you can see the grid lines. Okay. So you want to line it up with something in the middle or even a horizontal line. Okay. So that's another way we can do a level. I can choose this little ruler here, okay, and place it along the top. Drag it way over here. Okay, I'm trying to line it up with the top like this. So even though I'm off the picture, it just gives me a better sort of fulcrum. There's a fancy word for you. And then when I let go, it corrects that to perfectly horizontal. Okay. So assuming that they wanted the building to be level, now this is level. Okay. So you have to be careful with leveling with things like trees and signs because they could actually be crooked. Crop so the building isn't in the center of the picture. Yeah, I think if I did that, I would lose this tree over here. I might want to keep the tree in because it's a nice framing composition there. And I like the people over here. So in this case, I actually would keep it centered because I don't want to crop some of the tree off. I like having a bit more of the tree. So I would leave it like that. Right. The next thing I would do is still want to fix that green color. So I'm going to go down into HSL, which is hue, saturation, and luminance. So brightness. Remember in Lightroom, there's a targeted tool. So if I click on this guy, right, you could do the same things in Luminar with the color tool, but you don't have this little targeted guy. So when I click on the grass and drag up and down, you see what it's doing? It's grabbing the yellow and the green. Okay, so this is one you have to be careful because it's affecting everything that's that color in the image, and you don't want to go too far. So just a hint, that's too far. Okay, so I want to darken a little bit, and then I still have the tool active. I'm going to desaturate a little bit as well. Okay, so see how the grass is now looking way better. Right? I could also adjust the hue. So if I want the grass to be bluegrass, we could make bluegrass or make it a bit more yellow. Okay, that blends a little bit nicer, right? So look at what I'm doing. Just hit escape to close that tool. Look at the difference with the grass. Okay, so right now the grass is the brightest thing in the picture and the most colorful, right? So your eye goes to 4 different things. Right, and I have this as a little thing I can add to the bottom here. Let me just find it. Oh my goodness, where is it? Okay, so the 4 things that grab your attention, and this be whether they are in the background or the foreground or the subject. Okay, so you want to make sure that the things that are grabbing attention are part of the subject, not the background or the foreground. Okay, so that's brightness. Okay, so you want to look for bright areas and tone them down, super high contrast, sharpness, and then super bright colors, okay, especially extra vibrant colors like this grass was. So when I turn the HSL back on, okay, look at the difference. I think I'm going to go back and make it not quite as dark, right? Because now that I've turned down the saturation and shifted the color, right, the green, let me just turn it on and off again. The green is not so offensive anymore, okay? And then if I wanted to do something similar with the sky, right, I could do luminance. Now, one thing you have to be careful of is, again, going too far. So this is what too far looks like. Okay, so there's a few things happening here. Do you see these streaks in the sky? Okay, so that's what's called banding. And that is being caused because I'm working on a JPEG. So there just isn't enough tonal range in this JPEG because it was also overexposed. I'm trying to pull detail out of something that there just isn't any detail, right? So number 1, you want to avoid banding. Number 2, if I zoom in a little farther, and this actually came up in our Luminar Neo course group. If you go and look at some of the images, there was one posted by one of our students there, and I recommended that he go back and edit again because of the sky was getting really grainy like this, okay? So again, if you get a grainy sky like that, it means that you're pulling your images and your edits too far. Okay, so if you're using Luminar and you're applying edits, make sure you don't apply them to the sky, especially if it's looking like this. Okay, so you use that mask tool to do that. Now that I'm zoomed in, I'm just going to go over here. Can you see what else is happening here? Right? Let me just turn this off so you can really see. Why is it not letting me turn the lights out? That's interesting. Let me see. It will not let me turn the lights out. So I should just be able to hit L, and it's not working for me. So I don't know why. So let's look at this one at 100%. Do you see there's sort of a halo of light sky around the trees? Okay, so that's another signal or indicator that you've gone too far. Okay, so there's a few things that you want to look for in terms of going too far, and this is one of them. Extra noise or grain, and the banding. So that's all showing up in the sky when I pull this too far. Okay, so I'm just going to darken it a little bit. Now we're getting banding here almost immediately, and if you had a raw file, that wouldn't be as a problem likely, right? But I still am not happy with the color of the sky, so I'm going to use this hue slider and this targeted tool and see if we can't make something a bit more sort of normal sky color. Does that look a little better? I think that's a little better. I could also just desaturate it a little bit. Okay, see how all of these things start to come into play together, and then I can darken it. Okay, so now look at our HSL before and after. Okay, and I didn't have to do any masking. So in Luminar, that's the color tool. Okay, and that's a powerful tool that we can use. Let's see, we got lots of comments here. Sheila asked a question. When you use the ruler and the crop tool and went outside the picture, did you try and stay straight and look like you were tilting up? So what I was trying to do is follow the line of the building here, the top line. Let's do it again. So crop tool, grab the ruler. So I could do it on a vertical, right, or on a horizontal. So let me try and do it on this here. So I'm just going to go right beside this tower. So I'm trying to line it up. And the reason that I go farther is because it just gives me a better representation. Okay, so see what happens when I let go. Okay, so it adjusted it ever so slightly different. And so it looks like I get a different view whether I do the ruler this way, and it could just be the perspective that it was shot at. Okay, so the other thing we can do is we can, oh, my keyboard's not working. That's what's happening. Lovely. My keyboard doesn't work. All right, so we're down to mouse then. I think I probably just need to charge it. The other thing we can do is go back down here to transform, okay, and choose level. Okay, so it tilted it the other way. So it's kind of just a little bit of niggling. We can also do guided in here, which will allow me to place some things like this. Okay, so I can place one there and one there. And what it's going to do is it's actually going to correct the perspective as well. So it corrected tilt, okay, and perspective. So then just escape to get out of it. Oh, right. Can't get escape. I'm just going to close it. Okay. So see what that's doing? That's fixing any perspective control distortion. I'm glad that helps, Sheila. The light in the path is distracting, Byron says. Maybe clone it out. Yeah, I agree. This part here. So I might do some work to clone that path out. And honestly, Lightroom is not the best tool to do that. I think Luminar would do a better job of cloning that out. So yes, you certainly could get rid of that path. Okay. Can you quickly review the buttons in transform? Sure. Okay, so off means it just resets everything back to nothing. Okay. Auto, sorry, I'm going to sneeze coming here. Oh, I spared you. 3 sneezes. Okay, let's try that again. So auto doesn't take into account the full perspective control. Okay, so see where I hover over it? It says it enabled balance, level, aspect ratio, and perspective. Okay, so auto kind of does a little bit, right? Go off. Level is just looking for correcting level tilt only. Okay, vertical only corrects perspective control. Full does everything. So if I click full, it's trying to correct left to right perspective as well. Right. So obviously that's not going to work here. But when I did the guided, it actually worked really well, I thought. So I'm just going to go back in my history and go back to there. There we go. Because I think that one works pretty well and it looks straight and also straight up and down this way. Okay. So try. I find that full almost never works. I'll try auto first, and then if it doesn't work, I'll just undo. And if there's a building like this, guided works really well because then you can just place the lines like I showed you. Okay. Yeah, it is allergy season. I've been having allergies in my eyes. I've seen my eye doctor because my eyes are allergic to the world, apparently. All right, so how's everybody doing there? Let's see what we got next. Okay, let's go to this one. So this one is submitted by Mac Alrod. Do you have a first name or is Mac your first name? Can we call you Mac? And let me just go and see what it is that you are using to process here. Oh, I can't find your submission. When did you send your image in? Oh, maybe that's Al. Is this Al? Aha. Okay, I found you, Al. I found you in my Google Sheet. All right. Gotcha. All right. So tell me where you shot this, Al. I was trying to guess. First I thought maybe Hong Kong, but there's English signs, so I'm thinking London. So tell me where you shot this. And would you prefer that I edit it in Lightroom or I can take this over into Luminar? I can do either. Okay. So you're using Lightroom 6. So Lightroom 6 doesn't have the masking features that I just demonstrated. Okay, so that's the one disadvantage, but you still can use it as a plugin for Luminar Neo. So why don't I do a hybrid of both for you as well? Okay, so if you're using Lightroom 6 or current Lightroom, I'll show you the plugin workflow with Neo, which is actually lesson 18. I forget, but it's a new one that's just been uploaded, so you should be able to watch that as well. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is change the camera profile. Okay, so this one is set to landscape. I could check the other ones, but I think landscape vivid's not too bad, but I think camera landscape is the best choice here. Okay, so I'm going to stick with that one. And then I'm going to do my little editing trick. Now, unfortunately, this one doesn't work in Neo. And if you're on Windows, you don't have the ability of seeing the histogram in Neo. So if you're using Lightroom 6, try this one. It should work. Okay. So put your mouse over the word whites, hold the Shift key, and double click. And what that does is it shifts the histogram over to touch the whites on that side. Then I'm going to do the same thing with blacks. Okay, so see what that's doing is it's just getting rid of some of that sort of haze or smog. That's San Francisco. Okay, all right. I wouldn't have guessed that. I guess I don't recognize the buildings. I was thinking that this one is the rounded one that is in London. So then the next thing I'm going to use, and in Neo, you'll find this in the landscape tool, is dehaze. So watch what happens. See that? So look at how it applied on the background first because there was more haze. And then as I kept going, it started to affect the whole image. So I think I want to stop about there. Okay. Now that I've done that, I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, it's kind of blue. So now let's look at the difference with white balance because this is a raw file from a Nikon. So I could choose any of the presets. I'm going to choose daylight. Okay. The thing I find with daylight, especially in Lightroom, the preset, is it adds too much magenta. So I usually scale it back to about 5. That's looking better. And I might even give it a little bit more yellow. Okay, getting there. Still looks green to me. Okay, now I'm going to darken the whole thing overall. So exposure slider, okay, is like the middle of your curve. It's midtones. Okay, so I'm going to pull it down in the middle. Okay, so remember, I haven't touched my saturation slider yet, but look how much color has been added just by adding sufficient blacks to the picture. Okay, let's check our tilt again. So we can use crop and then auto. Okay, so that seemed to do a good job. Right, that looks pretty well balanced. I can try just eyeballing. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure that the lines of the buildings are sort of matching up. Right, let's go back. Let me just reset it. Let's go do the transform tool. There is now a transform perspective in Luminar Neo. It's under the develop tool. Okay, at the bottom, you'll see these. And it's, I think it's just called, I forget what it's called now. We'll hop over there. Okay, so let's try auto. Okay, so see how it did a tilt correction and a little bit of everything there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to turn it off. Let's try full, and we're going to get something weird, I'm sure. So see, I almost never use full. So I like what's happening with level or auto. That looked pretty good. See the difference there? So I'll do it again. Level is going to do this. And then auto, see how the bottom expanded a little bit? I love that, Sheila. I'm gonna use that. I'm allergic to oversaturation. Yes, I'm allergic to neon puke. That's what happened. Right. Awesome. I love that you guys get me and my sense of humor. We are on the same page. Okay, so far we're just correcting the distortion and some of the haze, right? So now let's hop over to Luminar Neo. Okay. I showed this again workflow in one of the lessons. Do you remember which lesson it was, Rob? You just edited that one. So there's 2 different workflows. Okay, you can open this into Photoshop first, and then open that from there into Neo as a filter, or you can open directly into Neo. So I shouldn't say usually. It depends is my answer as to which one I do. Okay. If I think that I'm going to be doing other edits, such as maybe I want to use liquify in Photoshop, or if I have some major cloning or things to do that I know Photoshop will do a better job, then I'll go to Photoshop first. Or if I think that I'm going to want to reconsider my edits at a later time, then I'll go to Photoshop. If I'm just coming in to add mystical or some special effects or a lot or something, then I'll just go straight to Neo. So I would say it's probably 50-50. Yeah, no neon puke. No neon puke, or we could make a thing that says neon puke with a, the circle with a line through it. Neon puke causes allergies. Awesome. Okay, so now that I'm in here, let's just take a little survey. I'm going to come off camera for a second here because I'm going to get rid of my sniffles. So I'm going to let you guys answer this one. What do you think we should do with this one in Luminar Neo, since you're all Luminar Neo students and you're learning so much? Which tools should I hop to here? Okay, I'm back. Al says crop. Start with develop, landscape, details. Okay, toning. So we got lots of ideas. Tell me why you would say those things. That's the next question. Why? Why would you do develop first, Leah? So basically, I've just done all the develop bits in Lightroom. Okay, so we're kind of at that point already. Brendan says crop as well. Too much info. Why would you use landscape, Sheila? Which of the tools in landscape? Maybe golden glow. So Rob says always start with develop as the base. Yes, that is true. However, I've done the develop bits in Lightroom. So basically, I've done develop already, including the tilt and so on. We could definitely look at details. I think that's probably a good choice. And let's say we want to give it a bit more sharpness and maybe even some small details. So let me see what that's doing. Yeah, that's looking good on the city. And then if I want, I can paint that in. So I'm just going to paint with a really large brush. Oh, now my keyboard works. Weird. Apparently my keyboard just didn't like Lightroom. So I'm just going to paint the details into the middle section here. See that? So I don't want the bit that's in the background. And then let's apply even a little bit more. Let's just take it to extreme and see what it's doing. Okay. So maybe not details. Maybe what we need is structure. Okay, so structure. Let's see what that's doing. So we don't want the structure on the background, but look at that. Look what's happening. It's actually bringing out the detail of what's back there. So it went from sort of, this is 0, right? It went from nothing to bringing out some detail in that background. Okay, so if you want that and not have the haze in the background, I actually like the haze, you could pull it up, but I'm just going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to paint it into the middle again. I like this road leading in here. So I'm just kind of doing a haphazard paint job here. Okay. Let's see a before and after. So it's subtle, but you can see the city sharpening up. Okay. What else? Color's a little stagnant, maybe flat. Presets, because you can do it without undoing the edits. Yeah, that's a good one, actually, Byron. So because I did the develop edits in Lightroom, I could apply a preset here and it would not undo the Lightroom edits. So yeah. When in doubt, add mystical, golden, and the tool above the golden glow. Okay, so landscape. So dehaze. So dehaze is the one that I already used over in Lightroom, remember? So if I do it again, we're definitely getting, oh, we're getting some golden too. So yeah, let's try golden hour because it is definitely a little bit sort of blah, right? Okay, good call. Yeah, that's doing some nice things for sure. Okay. Let's see. Relight maybe. Looks like there's another layer of mountains in the distance. Yeah, possibly. I don't know if I would do relight here. Okay, let's try it. Why not? So what do we want to do? We want to darken the background, and then we need to figure out where it's darkening. So I like to pull that up. So look at it. It's considering this as the subject. So if I increase it all the way, it's not getting me to the city. That's my problem with relight, is it often doesn't go far enough, right? Because I'd rather have it relight the city. But look at what's happening. When we made this darker, look at how nice that looks. So I'm actually going to undo this. I'm not going to use that tool, but I am going to go in here and just darken the whole thing a little bit because that looks really good. Look at that. Okay, now if we want to brighten the city or leave the city bright, we could do a vignette, right? But remember, a vignette's going to be circular in some nature. So if I do develop again, take the exposure way down, right? So I'm going to do that. And I can't wait until they come up with the masking tools for this that are the radial filter and so on. So right now I have to paint it in. So I'm going to paint this in. Or maybe I want to paint it out. Let's erase. Let's erase from the city. Right? Because I want the background and the foreground to get darker. So see how I did that? Now I'm going to lower my strength, make a bigger brush, and then do a second pass here. So I'm just doing that so it fades a little bit more so the foreground is darker. Right? And then I'm going to do one smaller one and just make sure I sort of get this. Okay, I'm trying to not get this halo over these over these mountains here. Okay, go away, Adobe. Adobe wants me to update. Okay, so let's see what that's doing. Look at the city now. Okay, really standing out. Holly says, I'd like to feel the road is leading us in. Tricky on this one because I can't really flip the image because then the city would be backwards. So tricky on this one. Let's see if we can crop a little bit. Let's see what Luminar suggests as a crop. So the purple button is a suggested crop. Okay, so it is suggesting that we crop in tighter. Well, let's just hit enter and see what that looks like. Are we happier with that? Now it definitely leads us in. So too much foreground. Rob is obviously Google mapping. I think that is, but maybe just a tiny bit too much cropping. So let's just back it off a little bit. I just want to have a little bit more below the road. But other than that, I think that's a pretty good crop. Yeah, totally. So let's look at the difference. So before, that's what we brought from Lightroom, and that's where we're at now. Yes, 3D horizontal and vertical, that's where those are your perspective controls in Luminar. So to find those, they're down here under transform. Yep. So vertical, horizontal, and aspect ratio. You cropped it almost into a panorama. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Let's just see. Okay, so I'm going to have to go free form on this one. And let's keep the full width. That's cool too. So you've got a couple options with this one. I actually like the crop that we had originally that Luminar did. I'm just going to let it come in. Maybe a combination somewhere between what you did, Al, and a little more panoramic. I like keeping the width of this building here, but I also like keeping the road. So I kind of like that cropping. The darkening of the foreground really brings our eye back into the city, right? I might try a LUT on this one. So mood. There's no San Francisco LUT, I don't think. There's Anaheim and San Diego. Let's try these. Okay, so now we get some very different colors. Okay. That one's kind of neat. That's kind of 70s. Ooh, what do we think of that? Look at that. So I turned up the amount higher, right? So we can see, but look how warm the city looks. I'm just going to dial it back a little bit, but I think that looks awesome. All right, let's do a full before and after Luminar. And I'm not going to do mystical on this one, Holly, surprisingly. I'm going to leave it nice and sharp. And we're going to apply and take it back to Lightroom. So let's look at the full before and after when it comes back into Lightroom. All right, so here we go. And I'm just going to duplicate this one. So that's what's called a virtual copy in Lightroom. So just duplicating the thumbnail. Another something that I wish that Luminar had, but it currently does not. Okay, so there's the full progression. Let me just get off the screen so you can see it bigger. Okay, so first one is the original image. Second one, you definitely can see that it was tilted, is the Lightroom edit, and then final Luminar edit. Sheila says, I wish I knew more about LUTs. I'm always guessing. You'll find that the more that you use the ones that are in Luminar, you'll get to know which ones are certain colors, like which ones will give you some pink, which ones will give you orange or brown. The other thing that you could do is pick one, export it, and then call it that name. For example, this one I used. Okay, let's say I use Anaheim. I forget which one I used here. Okay, so let's say we used Anaheim. So I would add that on Anaheim LUT, export it, and then save the file name with an extension or a dash Anaheim. Then you just make yourself a little contact sheet. That's actually, you know what? I can do something like that for YouTube. Thanks for that idea, Sheila. I will do something on LUTs and making yourself like a little proof sheet. Great idea. Votes for the Luminar Neo edit. Yeah, excellent. Bird's eye view. Exactly. All right, so let's see how we're doing here. I have a tutoring session this afternoon, but not for a while. So I think we can go another half an hour or so today. Now, here's an interesting thing. This one, right? We did some, oh, that's the base one. Let's go here. So we did some basic edits in Lightroom, right? So I'm actually going to copy all of these edits, right? Maybe not the masking. I can't remember if I did any masking in here, but I'm not going to copy that. I'm going to copy everything, okay, and apply it to this image. Okay, so currently in Luminar, you can only copy all of the adjustments, but once you've copied them in, you can still see all of the edits that have been done and alter any of them. So I'm using Command or Control V. And you see that it did exactly what I expected. It punched up the color and the contrast using the dehaze slider again. Okay, what I should have done, I'm just going to undo that. What I should have done when I copied this one is not copy the crop, okay? Assuming that the crop is not going to be the same, and also transform. Okay, so I'm going to undo those and only copy those things, right? Now I can redo the level myself. Okay, so here's another interesting little trick. Okay, if you were using the crop tool and you use auto or you use the slider to correct it or however you decide to adjust it, okay, but if you use the crop tool to do that and you copy and paste that onto the next image, okay, so I'm just going to copy this one, for example, here, okay, just the crop. And let's just say I paste it onto this one. Okay, so see what's happened is it added exactly the same amount. Okay, but instead, if I don't do it with the crop tool, if I do it with the transform and this level tool, Okay, so it's going to try and find the horizon. Didn't do a very good job there. Let's try auto. It's not finding the horizon, right? So this is a bad example, obviously, but if there was an image that had a nice clear horizon or something where it adjusted it, let's say this is Nigel's image, okay? So if he had shot a series of these from the same location, but handheld, so the horizon is always crooked a little bit, but they may not be crooked to the same degree. If you use level in here, see, it says no upright correction found, haha. Okay, so let's try auto. No. So it's looking for something upright. Okay. So if you were able to use that, I don't know if I have another example of that. Let me go back into my reserves here. I don't have a good example of that right now. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, so if I used this image and I chose level, okay, so see how it corrected that? Now, if there were similar images of this one that were all shot handheld, but were all crooked to different degrees, okay, using this level and copying, pasting, they will all get adjusted to the correct amount for each one, even if they're different, okay, versus using the crop tool, it always goes to that same degree, okay, so that might not be correct for each one. So if you have a series and you want to adjust them all, use the level as opposed to crop. So there's a nice little side bonus tip. Okay, so look at what just adding those same contrast tools has done here. Okay, so when you have this kind of haze, right, dehaze is definitely your friend. Right, now I'm just going to go back here and use my Alt Option key. Okay, this one's gone maybe a little too far on the whites. Maybe I'll go a little farther on the black, and maybe not so much on exposure. Okay, so now I can just dial it back from there. I am going to correct this tilt with the crop tool. So I'm going to use the ruler and just go across. I'm trying to find where the horizon is. It's very hazy, but somewhere in there. Right, now we're at the same sort of question about cropping again, right? So when you look at the thirds, we've got a third clouds, a third sort of these waves in the middle, and then a bit of foreground. So you have to decide, okay, what's important here? Is it the clouds or is it the foreground, right? In this case, I think it's actually more of the foreground. So I hate to crop off the clouds because they're actually really cool. So maybe we'll go a bit more panoramic on this one. Well, let's crop that house out, make it more natural. So I'm still kind of going with the thirds idea. Still looks crooked to me. Let's go a little bit further. How's that? Right, so that looks a little better. Now we can select sky, and let's see how Lightroom does on this one. Okay, so it did a pretty good job. Notice how it overlapped the water, and I'm going to increase the dehaze here, but look what's happening. Okay, so even though this is a raw file, right, we're overdoing it. Okay, so what happens? We got grain, we got some weird color. Okay, so it's overdoing it. So I'm definitely going to use, let's try clarity instead. Okay, so notice how clarity gives me more of that contrast in the clouds that I'm looking for without the increased saturation. I'm also going to increase the whites because I want to punch these clouds up. So look what happens when I increase whites, maybe even contrast. Okay. So play with a few different sliders. Right? And I can also adjust this. Okay? So it's added the sky based on that. But if I don't want it coming over the horizon so much, I can subtract a linear gradient and just kind of make it a little bit more gradual. Okay? So now it's not affecting that part as much. So we've left a little bit of glow at the horizon. Okay, so punching up one image, you can use the same edits if you have another one that is similar. Let's try that on this image since AJ is here. Okay, so I want to try this here, and he sent his image edit as well. So this is AJ's version. Okay, so he's definitely increased the contrast and darkened it. Now I've done one edit already, but I don't want to share it with you just yet. Okay, so I'm going to copy again on this one. Oops. Oh, apparently I have to go here. Okay, so I'm going to copy, and I'm going to not copy the masking or the cropping. Okay. And then let's paste it onto this one. So it did a pretty good job, right? And what I did, I'm going to show you my finished image. So what I did was I actually flipped the image the other way and tilted it, okay? I found that the stick going straight across was very static. There's no movement. When you have up and down lines or horizontal lines, there's no movement. So diagonal lines give you more movement and flow in your picture. So I really tried to emphasize that. And then the reason I flipped it was because I wanted this little branch here to be going up as opposed to down. Okay, and I want to show you another trick here. Okay, so I'm going to flip it back. Okay, and that's under photo, flip horizontal. Okay, so I want you to see the difference. Okay, so look at this one. Does that feel like it's going uphill or downhill? And where does your eye end up going? Where does your eye finish on this one? Let's see. I only did the details in Lightroom. I could have spent an hour working on it. Neo did an hour's worth of work in a few minutes. I don't know about an hour, but definitely Neo saves time. Yeah. I find, Stephanie, a lot of times I will do my basic edits in Lightroom. The color adjustment and the masking is really good. But then my After Effects, I'll go to Luminar for. Okay, so let's see. Al is saying downhill. Okay, yes. Down, and your eye goes to the spot on the left. Bingo. That's exactly what I was looking for. Okay, so 2 downhill, bottom third is where the eye goes. Okay, so remember all those 4 things that I said your eye goes to, right? There's a lot of contrast in the background. So even though I've darkened this one considerably, right? So the original, I got to get over to Lightroom. The original, let me get out of here. Oops. There we go. The original is really bright, right? And I know that you did that in your edit as well. I also warmed it up a lot. Okay, so there's lots of blue here, and I wanted more yellow to bring out this, like these yellow in these branches. So if I zoom in here, look what happens. Look at that. He's got these beautiful starbursts on these droplets. Okay, now why did he get starbursts? Okay, anybody know before I give you the answer? Going once. Going twice. I'm gonna wait for it. I know it takes a minute for you to type and get that into the chat, so I tend to just blather on while you're typing. The answer is aperture. Okay, so notice he's only using f8 here, but usually around f8, f11, or smaller, anything that is a small or a tiny bright light source will start to turn into a star. Okay, so Leah had the answer right. Sheila, f22. Leah, aperture. No, other way around, AJ. You want a smaller aperture. Okay, so 2.8 is actually a big opening. I forgot that I'm not on the screen. I'm gesturing, but you guys can't see me because I took myself off the screen. Aperture, so f2.8 is a big opening. F22 is a small opening. Okay. So yes, anything f8 and smaller will start to give you starburst. So you don't need a star filter. You just need to close your aperture down. But the disadvantage of that is it makes more of the background in focus, right? So it's kind of, 6 of one and a half dozen of the other. You can see his lens right here, 70 to 200, f2.8 is the lens that he was using, Sheila, right? On a Nikon, right? You weren't able to do that at 2.8. You were at f8. So there you go. So the lens is 2.8, but your aperture that you used was f8. Right? So when it says that the lens is 2.8, that just means that that is the biggest it can open, and that's a very nice lens. Right? Yes, Nikon, Sheila. Okay, so let's look at these again. So the flipped version, okay, everybody said it looks like it's going downhill, right? And your eye goes to that bright spot over on the left. So when I flip it, now where does your eye go? And does this look more uphill? Okay, so it's a mind trick, right? So it's not really going either way, right? For all we know, the stick was perfectly level, but when you have it like this, it looks like it's going uphill because, again, you read from left to right. So your eyes are going this way, right? Your eyes are going this way, and it feels more uphill, okay? Now your eye goes here, and then it goes to the spot, but it actually keeps your eye in the picture then, because then you go to these little bright spots over here. So I did do some masking on this one. Okay, I'll just turn it on and off to show you. So the masks I did, right, I actually, on the bottom and the top, okay, so this one, right, I applied to the stick. I applied texture and clarity to bring out those starbursts even more. And then on this one, I applied 2 linear gradients, right, with the opposite of the stick. So I didn't want to do it fully. I could have just done subject and invert, but I wanted it to fade into the stick a bit more and be a little bit more gradual. And here I did minus exposure, minus highlights, minus contrast, right? Minus contrast, minus texture, minus clarity, and minus sharpness. Okay, so see what that's doing? It's actually eliminating a lot of these highlights. Okay, so if I turn this one off, see the difference? So you still go to this little thing that looks like a moon, but it's not so bright that it just is overwhelming. Okay? So everything that I'm doing here has to do with drawing the eye in, right? And we're going to talk about that in some subsequent lessons in the course as well. Let's see. Rob is sending me a private message. Wanted to see the EXIF data. I think I showed that, right, Rob? I showed the data on top of the photo. So there's the shooting information there. We saw that. So AJ, you had a epiphany today, had an aha moment. Awesome. Might look good with a bokeh texture. Aha! All right, good idea. Let's try it. Why not? Let's go for it. Okay, let's take this to, so we could do that in Photoshop, but we're going to take it to Luminar Neo because it now has layers, right? So we can do that if you have Luminar AI. How did I do that with the EXIF? AG, I just pressed, what did I press? I, information on, if you're in Lightroom. I, and it cycles through the various different views. That's the answer you wanted. Okay, I'll come back to that. I'll show you how I got that to show up. All right, so now that we're here, I'm going to add a bokeh. Let's just see. I've got a few already in here. Let's try this yellow one. I think this is one I gave you guys with the course, so you should be able to give this one a try. Let's try and get most of it in the background. And then, of course, we want one of these blend modes. Maybe even try overlay. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. Look at that. Right? Look at that. Look at how that transforms the image completely. How cool is that? Now, these things down here are really bugging me. Okay, so I am going to go into develop, take my highlights all the way down. And I'm just trying to, I'm going to affect this area down here. Okay, so you know that I'm going to paint this in. It won't let me paint that in. Well, that's interesting. So there's something I just discovered, that I can't paint that edit in on here. I wonder if I can do that with any of these other ones. If I apply it. Okay, so that's interesting. So apparently we cannot paint this in when we do it on a layer. So perhaps that's something that they're still building in. So I'm going to go to the base layer, the bottom image again. Actually, that's where I want to paint it anyways. And I'm going to take the contrast way down. Okay, and I'm going to be painting into these bright areas. Okay, so I'm going to do a lower opacity. So I'm going to get these branches toned down. Okay. I can also go in and clone some of them out, which might end up happening. So we could use the erase tool. I want to keep this one that looks like the moon because it's kind of cool. But all these other bright ones, okay, so make note that as I'm doing this, I'm only working on the bottom image, not on the bokeh. But how it's affecting it is the relationship to the bokeh on top, right? So I think we're getting somewhere there. And then let's take the structure down. Well, that's going to help too. So let's paint that in. I'm going to paint, again, a lower strength. So the reason I do the lower strength is because then it just blends. So I'm painting one brush stroke and then the other. Okay? Now we're getting somewhere. That's kind of cool. Okay? And I might go in and just erase some of these. Let's just see if that does any better. Ones that are problematic. Yeah, that works. So let's just get rid of some of these here. We can decide where we want our bokeh, right? And I could erase the big one. Let's just see what happens if I erase it, if it looks funny. How are we coming? So see how I'm doing a couple at a time, and I'm not trying to do them all, because if it goes wrong, I'd have to undo all of it, right? So that's looking pretty good. That looks pretty good. All right, let's just see what happens if I attempt to remove this whole thing. Okay, it didn't work as good as I had hoped, so I'm just gonna put it back. Yeah, I have to do a smaller one, I think. Let's do like that. Yeah, it's not filling in perfectly, so I would do a little better job. But what do we think? Do we keep the little highlight? I kind of like it. So I'm just going to leave it there. Sort of balances and it works with our current bokeh, right? Hokey bokeh. We'll do the hokey bokeh. You guys are awesome. Likes the uphill version. Marguerite likes uphill. You already got a prize, Holly. You got a hat and a shirt. So you can have our undying admiration. How's that? Yeah, I love it. So now, thanks for that, AJ. We're all going to be singing that song today. Yeah, thanks for that. You had other shots of this angle with 2.8, which natural bokeh. Yeah, and then you got rid of the bokeh because you ended up with those starbursts. So you actually could blend both of those images together in Luminar, right? So you could use the one with the bokeh as your second layer. You just have to process it and make it a JPEG. Al prefers erased. Some people are saying take it out. So I would do a little more work to take it out, do a more perfect job. Yeah. Yes, there's whole 3 lessons. So 14, 15, 16 are all working with layers, including bokeh and texture. But I really like what this has done here. Let's go back to this bokeh layer here. Okay, so look at how it's really sort of adding drama, right? Oof, let's go crazy. Yeah, I think you're right. Now that we've done that, I think we want to get rid of that thing. So let's go back over here. I'm going to zoom in and do it right. Let's just see what happens if I get rid of half of it first. See what it does. That's not bad. I might have to do a couple of erases to get it to blend. That's not bad. I find that if it shows up with a pattern, if I go the opposite way, it'll do a better job of sort of filling in. This is going to be a dark area anyway, so I don't think we're going to notice if there's a slight imperfection there. And that just sort of looks like another bokeh. So what do we think? I think that's really way cool. Way cool. And it's even highlighting this little sort of flower thing there. I might get rid of these guys too. I'm not crazy about this bright highlight here. I don't know how well it's going to erase, but let's try it. Well, it's not too bad. I can just do another little pass. See how I'm doing smaller brush? Get rid of these little artifacts. The erase tool is actually really, really good. Okay, so now I'm getting carried away because I'm seeing more and more little spots that I want to get rid of that are bothersome. Okay, so it's these little things, right, that make the difference between a good image and a great image. So let's take that back to Lightroom. Way cool, right? It totally transforms the image, right? Can I enhance the starbursts? Yeah, I probably could have done that and gone in with the details and the structure and increased and just painted them onto the stick and the starbursts. Yeah, using the masks. So now we've got starbursts and bokeh. Way cool. So I didn't know we were going to take this image here. That was all your guys' idea. So let's take a look at our versions here now. So we've got, this is the original version. I'm going to move this one over here. Okay, are we ready for it? I'm going to start with this one. So this is our original image. That's AJ's edit. That was my first Lightroom edit. Flipped. And then our final edit from Luminar. A work of art. Yes. Looks Christmassy. Awesome. So yeah, it totally transformed this image. You could decide to take things a different direction. And this is what I would call sort of a happy accident, because we put this bokeh on and then just by dialing it up and the blend mode that I chose, we came up with this, right? So it was a group effort. Awesome. Like I said, I had no idea we were going to take that image there. Is Anne here today? I didn't see her. Has Anne Ambro been busy, Rob? I haven't seen her because she's got a couple of images that she sent in. Right. How do I get the EXIF overlay to show? Okay, so let me go back here. So when you are in Lightroom, okay, I'm doing I on my keyboard. Okay, so it should just be, where is it? It's not showing up, of course. Right, so it's the loop overlay. Right, so show overlay, okay, cycle overlay is I. So just by I, but you can also set up what you want to be in them. Okay, so this is what's called loop view. Okay, so I went to view options, and this is loop view. So I have two different versions set up. So loop view 1 shows me the name, the capture time, and the camera settings. Loop number 2 shows me common photo settings, the exposure, and metering. Okay, so then when I cycle through them by pressing the I key, okay, so that's the first one. So I get the file name, shooting information, camera, okay, also time and date. Second one, I get all the camera settings, lens, shooting information in terms of shooting mode and metering. Okay. Oh, Anne's here. Awesome. Okay, so let's do one of yours then. So I noticed that, well, I recognize these guys, first of all, both of these images. So we recognize the Jarlosas, the chatters, the gossipers. This is in Camagüey. I think it was near our hotel, right? I think it was near that art shop that we stopped at that lots of people bought stuff. So both of these have the same challenge, which is the light is behind them and the background is bright, right? So I'm going to take this one into Luminar because we're going to try the relight and so on. But I wanted to show you what happens when I change the camera profile. Okay, so landscape is giving us a lot of blue. Okay, so look what happens when I choose standard, really tones down his shirt, neutral, portrait. So see how he gets nicer color in his face? Okay, landscape's about the blue, which is enhancing skies and grass. This one's really flat. So I'm going to start with portrait because it automatically brings more information or more emphasis to his face. Okay? I'm still going to do my shift double click. And then let's try one of the presets. Okay, all of these things are, the white balance is in Neo as well. Okay, so I'm going to try cloudy. So it made him a lot warmer. So see how it changed the temperature and the tint? I'm going to take a little bit of magenta out and maybe not quite so much yellow. But look at how much better he looks already, right? He was looking a little pale. Okay, so he's got nice contrast. Now we got to go deal with this wall. Okay. We can do highlights. That helps. If you were using Lightroom, let's try subject here and see if it gets him. Okay, now I can invert it and do highlights. Okay, so now see how that's affecting the background again. If I darken, it's going to affect this part too. And I'm just going to take the clarity and the texture down because I don't want as much texture showing in this wall as what's currently there. Oops, I meant to do sharpness. Actually, saturation down. It has a weird green color. Okay, so just doing that helped us. But I want to, I'm going to turn this one off because I want to see if we can do the same thing in Neo. So let's go over there because there's a few different tools that you can use to brighten the subject and darken the background, right? Because it's a portrait, you have more things at your disposal than if it was like the city, the landscape, right? Opening in Neo. Okay, so now is a quiz for my students in the course. What tools can I use to brighten him and darken the background? Okay, there's several. Anne says she's using Neo more than Lightroom. Awesome. Yeah, for the overlay in Lightroom, you don't have to go to the metadata to see the shooting information at all. Yeah, if you just do that overlay. Yes, Cuba. Okay, so Sheila says relight and face. So face AI, yeah. What else? There's at least one more. Actually, two more. Brian says relight as well. Okay, so let's try those first. And then if you think of any others, I'm going to go to the portrait tools first, though. Okay, so I think that Sheila's talking about my face trick. So face light, okay, brightens him. So notice how that's like adding a reflector to his face. So I'm going to brighten him fairly significantly. And then the counter to that is I need to lower the exposure. Okay, so by doing that, I have to wait for Neo to catch up with me. There we go. Okay, by doing that, I'm kind of like adding a vignette everywhere except his face. Okay, so see what that's doing? So that's step one. Okay, now let's try Portrait Bokeh AI. Okay, so relight probably will work, but I want to see if bokeh AI will work as well, because not only can we control the brightness of the background, we should be able to also blur it and shift the color. Okay, so relight only is about lighting, whereas the bokeh tools allow you to do a bit more. So right out of the gate, I see that that's working well. It's not picking up this side of the wall, so I'm going to bring the depth correction to the minus. Okay, so if I go all the way, it's going to show really, really blurry. Okay, so that's not realistic because he's sitting next to the wall. So I want to scale it back a little, but you see how that's doing a really nice job? Actually, let's take my amount all the way. Let's go extreme. Actually, look at that. We can totally blur the background out so we don't even know that he's sitting right next to the wall. I'm going to do a slight trick that I do, and I taught you this in the lesson, is I just use my brush set to 50%, and I just like to go around. So my inner circle, when I've got my brush set to 100% soft, my inner circle is touching the outer edge of him. So I'm kind of just fading it out a little bit so that the mask that Luminar created isn't so harsh. And it usually picks up some things like hair. Okay, so if I do it again, I'm going to go around again on his hair. It just picks up and allows any straggly hairs. See how that picked up some stragglers up there? Oops. Let's zoom out. That's a little too much zoomed in. You see the difference there? is it's now showing some of his hair. Okay. Take a minute for it to draw. See the difference? So it's picking up some of those hairs and it just looks a bit more realistic. So I like what's happening there. Now we could cool the background down and darken it. Let's go extreme, right? Remember, always try things to the maximum. You can see there's a little bit of a halo around him now, and there's something going on here. It's not picking up that. So I want to make sure I defocus that part. Okay, so that should be defocused in the background. Okay, so I zoomed all the way to do that. Okay, that looks better. And it looks like I did too much masking up here, so I might defocus up here a little bit as well. Okay. And then scale it back. So I take it far just to see what I can do, and then scale it back a little. What happens if we go the other way? Actually, that works too, right? So warming it up kind of goes with that rust color, and it actually complements his skin tone a little better. I want to just make sure this area is defocused. Okay, so look at what Relight is doing. Or sorry, bokeh AI. So it's blurring that background, and we can't do that with Relight. Okay. Look at that. Now I'm going to add a vignette overall. So take it dark, feather down, size, make him a little bit more round. And I want to get it sort of just around his head, because I don't want too much of that wall. Okay. So I can still move it around until I click choose subject again, put the feather up, and then amount. Okay, so you don't want to do stuff like this. You don't want to do that. Okay, so you don't want to see the vignette. You want feather nice and high and a gentle edge darken. I'm going to place the subject a little bit more so it darkens more behind him. So this part behind him is not getting darkened snuff. Okay, how's that? Let's go a little darker. Now, the blue shirt kind of bugs me, okay? So it's really vibrant. I'm going to go into color in HSL, and I'm going to change its color. Okay, so I know that it's blue. Look what happens. I can actually make his shirt purple or change it more sort of teal. I like the teal color. That's kind of cool. Yep, that's the one that's affecting him. So I'm going to bring it more teal. And then I'm going to take the saturation. So see, it's still affecting that same blue down a little bit. And of course, we can do luminance and darken it. Okay, so see what that's doing? It's just minimizing his shirt. The wall is still pretty bright behind him, but we've minimized it a great deal, right? So let's try Relight for the last one that somebody else suggested. And I'm going to go darken, far, light, and near. So again, I like to take it to extremes. That's extreme, all right. And then just adjust. Okay, so I want to make sure that I get, there we go. See how it just folded in that wall there? That's what I want. So not quite so dark, and definitely not so bright on him. Somewhere in there. Okay, now there is sort of a halo happening around him here. So I'm going to see if the dehalo helps. If I turn this up, let's see if that does any better. There we go. That's helping. Again, I like to take things to either extreme. See more halo? Do you see what I'm seeing with this halo? There's this little white edge around him. Okay. And I'm just going to warm him up a little bit. Okay, that's better. And also, if you find that there's a halo, it just means, too, that you may need to scale the whole thing back a little bit. But that looks pretty good. So let's see the tools that we used. right? So face light, and then develop, portrait bokeh, vignette, color, and relight. Now I could actually go back into color because the other thing that I can do is adjust his skin tone. Skin tone contains a lot of orange. So see what's happening? If I increase that, those spots in the background are actually getting lighter as well. So I'm going to brighten him a little bit. Ooh, look at that. Skin has red also, so we can actually give him more contrast on his face that way. And then let's try a hue shift. Going a little bit this way will just give him a bit more orange as opposed to red. Now let's see what that's doing. So it's affecting his shirt. And I'm going to come back a little bit on that one. Affecting his shirt and his face. Okay, see that? I might give him a little bit more saturation as well. Right? Now, because I noticed that those spots in the background will be affected by color, I have to wait for the edits to come into effect here because we've got the bokeh to apply yet. Let's see. DPM Dictionary of Useful Phrases. I love that. Oh, yes. Editing is a dance. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Are you collecting these, Rob? What if I erased the hole in his shirt where he missed a button? Would it make it look like his shirt is closed? Probably not. But I think that's kind of quirky. That's a little quirky thing about this guy. So I kind of like that his shirt is crooked. Lesson 19 is epic. Well, it's epic in that it's one of these things that's not very exciting because I talk about backing up and equipment, but it's something that you need to do, right? All right, let me just make sure my edits are applying here. Okay, yeah. All right, so now I'm going to go to the color tool again. And I noticed that it lessened those spots, right? So if I look what's happening to the background, I can brighten those spots. I'm looking at the background, so I'm not worried about him. I'm just looking at the background. See how the background has yellow? So I'm brightening it, and then I'm going to take the saturation down. And now, again, I'm toggling it on and off, but I'm just looking at the background. See that? Because I'm going to paint it in. Bigger brush. Don't want to get it on him. Like so. So see how that's really helping the background spots get toned down as well. Okay. Now my favorite, let's do one of the Orton effects on him. Let's try regular Orton effect. Oh, that does a nice job. It does tend to brighten. And it does tend to add a little bit more color. Let's try Orton Soft instead. This one I usually add contrast to. It's a little too soft for my liking. I like this one. There we go. Okay, so before Neo and after. Now the question is, could we have done that with Lightroom? Probably, because you saw how I did the select subject and then we could invert it to select the background. So we can do similar things. You can also do the same thing with the HSL panel on his clothing. However, one of the things that I talked about in terms of advantages of Neo is that Lightroom only has one HSL tool. So you can only apply it globally. You cannot mask it. And then if you go to create a mask, you'll notice that I'm just going to select him, for example. Okay. So if I create a mask, there is no HSL. So I can't do different edits to his shirt, his face, and the background using HSL tools like I did in Neo. Okay. So there's definitely some advantages. I don't need this mask. Okay, there we go. So there's the original. I'll delete this one too. There's the original. Actually, we need to make a copy and then reset it. So there's the original. And there's our progression. Original, Lightroom, Neo. Okay, Anne, you're up. Challenge on. You did so good with the city one last time. Now is your turn to do this one. Yes, another reason to use Neo. It is a really good program. And I don't understand a lot of the people that are complain about it, because honestly, sure, there's things missing if you came from Luminar AI, but there's so much in there that's good, and where they're going to take it, I have confidence that they're just going to improve it even more. We have a meeting actually next week as ambassadors and partners with Skylum. So I will be talking to some of the team, and I've been in contact with them, and they're all, doing as well as can be expected. They're still working in the conditions, that whichever they find themselves in, and they're still coming up with updates for us. So kudos to Skylum for continuing to operate business. There was an interview with, I think, Ivan, one of the CEOs, and he said that they will continue to pay their staff, even if the men, for example, who are a lot of their developers, end up getting put into the army or having to go into the army. They will continue to pay them. So their families will continue to be supported. And I think that's a great company to say things like that. That was my update, Anne. So I love the way glow can be tweaked and work with portraits. Yes, the glow tools, and I gave this information in the course about the Orton effect. Was it the other day? Yeah, we talked about that, in the live thing, because there was a guy named Orton that created it, where he sandwiched one slide film that was sharp with one slide film of the same subject that was out of focus, and he created that look by putting two slides together, and then now it's been created digitally, right? So thank you to those who have already liked this live video, like the stream. Please remember to give this a like. It helps other people find us on YouTube, in the sea of YouTube, and subscribe to the channel. And now that you know how to find the lives, feel free to submit any of your images at any time, like the ones that you saw here today from some other students, right? No monthly subscriptions, yay! Exactly. So I still use Adobe because I'm really ingrained in Adobe. I've been using it for 20 years, and I have 180,000 images in my Lightroom catalog. But if you are new, like Brennan says, by all means, just stick with, it's going to do 99.9% of what you need. Yeah. Yes, thumbs up to the Skylum team. I think I shared an article in the main DPM Facebook group, but for those of you that are in the course, I'll share it as well in the course group with you, the interview from the CEO, so that you can check it out. It's one of the things that I like about the company. They're real people that I've chatted with, haven't met any in person, but they all just seem like really nice people, and they care about their employees and as people, right? I'm going to share with some friends, but you don't want them getting too good. Aha! So you have ulterior motive, Sheila. So you don't want to share with them. Well, you're still ahead of them, so they'll never catch up, right? And you're doing the course, so share away. And if you have already shared the course, we thank you a great deal. So I'm just going to pop back over to here again. I closed out my other one. So we've been talking about the Luminar Neo, the complete course. Rob, if you could put a link up on the chat again. I think a good number of people that watched today are already in the course, so that's great. It's nice to see you guys again, and we'll see you in 2 days, same time. So we'll see you for the next live on Monday, and we're going to be doing lessons 11 through 13. Then which is the portrait stuff. So more of what we just saw today. And then we're going to get into layers. It's getting really exciting, guys. So take care. Have a great weekend.